The room went silent as I slid the black dossier onto the Thanksgiving table. "We've decided you're out of the family," my sister had just declared, her smirk sharp enough to cut glass. 10 years of bankrolling their greed was over. My mother's feigned tears dried up when she met my gaze. Blood ties can be severed. The rain was relentless that Thanksgiving, hammering Seattle's streets like a judgment. I stood outside my mother's suburban house, the glow of fairy lights bleeding through the fogged-up windows, mocking the warmth I'd hoped to find inside. My breath clouded in the November chill, and my hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of the black dossier tucked under my arm. 10 years of my life, distilled into damning pages, ready to shatter the illusion of family I'd clung to for too long. I was Eleanor Harper, 32, cybersecurity consultant, and tonight I was walking into an ambush. The door swung open before I could knock, and my mother, Margaret, greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ellie, you're soaked. Come in, come in." Her voice was syrupy, the kind of warmth you'd expect from a Hallmark movie mom, but I knew better. Her embrace was brief, her perfume cloying, and her eyes darted to the leather satchel slung over my shoulder. She was fishing, as always, for what I might have brought, cash, checks, or the promise of both. I forced a smile, my heart thudding like a war drum, and stepped into the house that had once been my home. The living room was a shrine to excess, a towering Christmas tree draped in crystal ornaments, garlands looping up the staircase, and a chandelier casting glints across a mahogany dining table, set for a feast. It was all paid for with my money, $325,000, 0 cents, over a decade, siphoned from my accounts to prop up their dreams, while mine withered. My sister Claire, 29, lounged on a velvet sofa, scrolling through her phone, her influencer-perfect curls catching the light. My brother Liam, 27, slouched beside her, nursing a craft beer, his hoodie emblazoned with the logo of his latest failed startup. Roger, my stepfather, hovered near the bar cart, pouring bourbon with the practiced ease of a man who'd rather drink than talk. They barely glanced up as I entered, but the air crackled with something unspoken, something vicious. "Ellie, you look tired," Claire said, her tone dripping with faux concern. "Work still eating you alive?" She didn't look up from her phone, but her lips curved into a smirk. I set my satchel down, the dossier inside it feeling heavier than ever, and shrugged off my coat. "I manage," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'd learned long ago not to give them ammunition. "Dinner's almost ready," Margaret called from the kitchen, her voice tinged with that practiced urgency she used to mask her motives. "Ellie, you brought the wine, right?" Of course I had. 2 bottles of Napa Valley Cabernet, $200, 0 cents each, because nothing less would do for Margaret's standards. I'd also brought a glazed ham, a dozen artisanal rolls, and a silent resolve to end the charade tonight. I nodded, carrying the bags to the kitchen, where the scent of roasted turkey and sage filled the air. It was the kind of scene you'd see on a holiday postcard, but beneath the surface, it was rotten. In years. That's how long I'd been their financial lifeline, ever since I landed my first job at 22, pulling $90,000, 0 cents a year at a tech firm in Seattle's buzzing South Lake Union. I was the golden child back then, fresh off a scholarship to the University of Washington, my computer science degree a ticket out of the chaos that had defined our family since Dad walked out when I was 14. He'd left for San Francisco with his new girlfriend, a yoga instructor half his age, and his child support checks were a trickle, barely enough for groceries, let alone the lifestyle Margaret refused to abandon. She'd married Roger 2 years later, a slick real estate agent with a smile like a used car salesman and a habit of dodging questions. He was supposed to be our savior, but his deals were as shaky as his handshake, and soon enough, I was the one footing the bills. It started small. A call from Margaret 3 weeks into my job, her voice quivering with worry. "Claire's car broke down, Ellie. The mechanic says it's $5,000, 0 cents, and with her college loans." She let the sentence hang, a hook baited with guilt. I wired the money that night, my fingers hesitating over the transfer button, but family was family, right? Claire sent a text. "Thanks, sis, lifesaver," and then ghosted me for a month. I didn't know then that the broken car was a stolen Mercedes she'd bought off some sketchy dealer, nearly dragging me into a police sting when the VIN got flagged. I found out later when a detective showed up at my apartment, asking questions that made my stomach drop. I'd talked my way out of it, claiming ignorance, but the betrayal stung worse than the fear. That was just the beginning. Liam needed $3,000, 0 cents, for a tech course that turned out to be a cryptocurrency scam he'd fallen for, losing every cent in a week. Margaret begged for help with property taxes, then showed up at Sunday dinner in a new designer coat. Roger's temporary job loss stretched into years, his excuses as flimsy as the contracts he waved around. Family dinners became a stage for their sob stories, each one carefully crafted to hit my heartstrings. I was 25 when Margaret called, sobbing, saying the bank was foreclosing on their house. I emptied my savings. $30,000, 0 cents I'd scraped together for a down payment on my own place to save it, only to walk into their living room a week later and find a gleaming $70,000, 0 cents SUV parked in the driveway. "A lease deal too good to pass up," Margaret said, avoiding my eyes. I said nothing, but the seed of doubt took root. By 28, I was covering their mortgage. $2,500, 0 cents a month, because Roger's latest deal had fallen through and Margaret had quit her receptionist job, claiming burnout. Claire's wedding at 26 was a $50,000, 0 cents extravaganza, every cent of which I funded, only to be relegated to a back table with distant cousins while Margaret toasted her generous support. Liam's $30,000, 0 cents app development loan bought him a cherry red Mustang, not a single line of code. I started the black Dossier then, a sleek folder where I logged every transfer, every promise, every lie. By last year, it totaled $325,000, 0 cents. 10 years of my dreams deferred, my savings gutted, my future mortgaged to their greed. I snapped out of my thoughts as Margaret clinked a glass, summoning us to the dining table. The spread was obscene. A 20-pound turkey, candied yams, truffle-infused mashed potatoes, and a cranberry compote that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. Claire snapped a photo for her Instagram, her 200,000 followers waiting to lap up her curated perfection. Liam cracked open another beer, his eyes darting to me, then away. Roger poured himself a third bourbon, his silence louder than words. I took my seat, the Dossier hidden in my satchel under the table, my pulse racing like I was about to defuse a bomb. "Ellie, you've been quiet," Margaret said, carving the turkey with a flourish. "Everything okay at work?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp, probing for cracks. I'd been promoted to senior consultant 6 months ago, my salary now $180,000, 0 cents, but I hadn't told them. I'd learned to keep my successes secret, because every raise, every bonus was just another opportunity for them to bleed me dry. "Work's fine," I said, sipping my wine, busy as usual. I glanced at Claire, who was typing furiously on her phone, probably live tweeting the dinner for clout. Liam shifted in his seat, his knee bouncing under the table. Something was off, the tension thicker than the gravy Margaret was ladling onto her plate. "Let's say grace," Roger mumbled, his first words since I'd arrived. We bowed our heads, but his prayer was perfunctory, a rote mumble about gratitude that felt as hollow as the promises they'd made me over the years. The moment he finished, Claire set down her phone and fixed me with a look that sent a chill down my spine. "Actually, Ellie, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharp as a knife. The room went still, forks pausing mid-air, glasses clinking softly as they were set down. Margaret's smile tightened, and Liam stared at his plate, his jaw clenched. Roger took a long swig of bourbon, avoiding my gaze. "About what?" I asked, my voice steady despite the dread pooling in my gut. I'd known something was coming, had felt it in the way they'd been dodging my calls, the way their texts had turned cold when I stopped sending money. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "We've been talking," Claire said, leaning forward, her eyes glinting with something cruel. "As a family. About you. About how toxic you've become." The word hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse from her, usually when I hesitated to fund her latest whim. "Toxic?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Care to elaborate?" "It's the money," Margaret chimed in, her voice dripping with rehearsed concern. "You hold it over us, Ellie. Always keeping score, making us feel like we owe you. It's not healthy." I almost laughed. Owe me. They did owe me. $325,000. 0 cents, to be exact, not counting the emotional toll of a decade spent as their personal ATM. But I stayed silent, letting them dig their own grave. "We had a vote," Claire continued, her smirk returning. "A family vote. And we've decided you're no longer part of this family." The words landed like a grenade, the room exploding into silence. My heart stopped, then roared back to life, pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I looked around the table. Margaret's crocodile tears, Liam's averted eyes, Roger's drunken detachment, and realized they'd planned this, not just to hurt me, but to discard me now that I'd stopped being useful? "Is that so?" I said, my voice calm, almost cold. I reached under the table, my fingers brushing the dossier's smooth surface. "Well, that's convenient, considering I brought something for the occasion." "What's that supposed to mean?" Claire snapped, her confidence wavering. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled the dossier from my satchel and placed it on the table, its black cover stark against the white linen. The room froze, their eyes locked on it like it was a loaded gun. "What's in there?" Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. For the first time, he looked scared. And he should have been. I'd spent years compiling this. Bank statements, text messages, emails, even photos from a private investigator. I'd hired after the truth became too heavy to ignore. It was my reckoning, and they were about to face it. "Open it," I said, sliding it toward Margaret. "I think you'll find it illuminating." She hesitated, her hands trembling as she reached for it. Claire's smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of panic. Liam's knee bounced faster, and Roger set his glass down with a clunk. I leaned back in my chair, the wine glass cool against my palm, and waited. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward for months, ever since that August night when I'd overheard them plotting to fleece me for a yacht, laughing about how easy I was to manipulate. Let me take you back to that night, because it's where this all began to unravel. It was a Sunday, one of those rare Seattle evenings where the rain paused long enough to let the stars peek through. I'd arrived early for our monthly family dinner, letting myself in with the key Margaret had given me for emergencies, code for delivering cash when their accounts ran dry. The house was quiet, the kitchen empty, but voices drifted from them. I moved toward the French doors, my sneakers silent on the hardwood, and stopped when I heard my name. "Ellie's bonus is coming up," Margaret was saying, her voice low but gleeful. "I'm thinking we go big this time. A yacht, maybe? That lakefront place in Tacoma's been calling my name. God, she's such a pushover, Claire laughed, the ice in her drink clinking. One sob story about a family emergency and she's wiring money before I can finish crying. Remember when she made me sign that loan agreement for the app? Liam chuckled. Like I was ever gonna pay her back. What's she gonna do? Sue her own brother? She's lonely, Margaret said, her tone matter-of-fact. No friends, no boyfriend, just that soul-sucking job. We're all she's got. She'll keep coughing up cash forever. To Ellie, Roger said, raising his glass. The gift that keeps on giving. Their laughter sliced through me, sharp and cold, like a blade I hadn't seen coming. I stood there, frozen, my hand on the doorframe, as the truth crystallized. I wasn't their daughter, their sister, their family. I was their mark, a walking ATM they marked behind my back. I slipped out the front door, texting Margaret that I had a migraine, and drove home in a daze, their words looping in my head. That night, I couldn't sleep. By morning, my hurt had hardened into resolve. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. The next day, I called in sick to work and dove into research. Online forums were filled with stories like mine. People drained by their own families, manipulated by guilt, isolated by shame. I found a therapist, Dr. Laura Bennett, who specialized in family trauma. What you're describing is financial abuse, she told me in our first session. Her voice gentle, but firm. It's also not your responsibility to fix them. I hired a lawyer, Daniel Pierce, who flipped through my dossier with a whistle. This is a gold mine, he said. Fraud, breach of contract, maybe even criminal charges. You've got a case, if you're willing to fight. I was. But fighting meant facing dangers I hadn't anticipated. The first came a year ago, when Margaret begged for $5,000, 0 cents, to cover Claire's medical emergency. I sent the money, only to learn from a detective that it had gone toward a stolen Mercedes Claire was driving. The cops thought I was complicit, grilling me for hours until I proved my innocence. The second was scarier. Liam's gambling debts had caught up with him, and one night 2 thugs showed up at my apartment, their eyes cold as they demanded I cover his $10,000, 0 cents tab. I talked them down, promising payment I never intended to make, but I slept with a baseball bat by my bed for weeks after. Then there was the hacker. Claire, desperate for cash, had paid some lowlife to breach my company's server, siphoning $20,000, 0 cents, before I caught it. The fallout was brutal. An internal audit, whispers from colleagues, and pressure from my boss to resign. I cleared my name, but it cost me weeks of sleepless nights and a chunk of my reputation. Just last month, my car's brakes failed on a rain-slicked bridge, nearly sending me into Puget Sound. The mechanic found the lines had been cut, but I had no proof it was them. And then there was the email, anonymous, sent from a burner account, hinting at Margaret's ties to a shady charity that smelled like money laundering. I hadn't traced it yet, but it was another thread in the web they'd spun around me. Back at the Thanksgiving table, Margaret opened the dossier, her fingers shaking as she scanned the first page. A spreadsheet summarizing $325,000, 0 cents in transactions. This is absurd, she whispered, but her voice cracked. Claire snatched it from her, her eyes widening as she saw the highlighted bank transfers. $50,000, 0 cents, for her wedding, $30,000, 0 cents, for Liam's car, $70,000, 0 cents, for the SUV. Liam's face went pale, and Roger downed his bourbon in one gulp. "You've been spying on us?" Claire hissed, slamming the dossier down. "This is insane, Ellie. Stalking your own family?" "Due diligence," I said, my voice steady. "Something I should have done years ago." I pulled out the investigator's report, photos spilling onto the table. Claire's tax evasion filings, Liam's Mustang parked at a friend's house, Margaret's offshore account statements. You thought I wouldn't notice? The yacht plans? The lonely cash machine you laughed about? You recorded us? Liam croaked, his eyes darting to the digital recorder I'd set beside the dossier. I pressed play, and their August conversation filled the room, their laughter echoing like a death knell. Margaret gasped, Claire froze, and Roger stared at his empty glass as if it could save him. I've spent 10 years believing I was helping you, I said, standing now, my voice ringing with a strength I hadn't known I had. 10 years canceling my plans, emptying my accounts, because family comes first. But you're not family. You're parasites. You can't prove this. Claire spat, but her voice wavered. I slid a legal letter across the table, drafted by Daniel Pierce. My lawyer disagrees. Fraud, theft, emotional manipulation, it's all here. You have 2 options. Sign repayment agreements, commit to therapy and rebuild this mess, or I sue you for every cent you've taken. Margaret burst into tears, real ones this time, her hands clutching the tablecloth. Ellie, please, I have a problem. The charity, the accounts, it got out of hand. I never meant... Save it! I cut her off. You had a decade to be honest. You chose lies. I gathered the dossier, tucking it back into my satchel. You have until New Year's to decide. My lawyer will be in touch. I turned to leave, my heart pounding, but my steps steady. Claire lunged after me, her voice shrill. Do you think you're better than us? You'll regret this, Ellie. Liam called out, pleading, but I didn't look back. The front door closed behind me, the rain washing over me like a baptism. I was free, terrified, heartbroken, but free. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a new email from the anonymous sender. Check Roger's safe. You're not safe yet. My grip tightened on the wheel, the Seattle skyline blurring through the rain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The Seattle rain hadn't let up since Thanksgiving, a relentless curtain that mirrored the storm raging inside me. I sat in my car outside my apartment, the engine idling, my phone buzzing with unread messages from Claire, Liam, and Margaret. Their words, angry, pleading, manipulative, were a cacophony I wasn't ready to face. The black dossier lay on the passenger seat, its weight no lighter despite the truths it had unleashed hours ago. I'd walked out of my mother's house with my head high. But now, alone in the dark, the gravity of what I'd done hit me like a freight train. I'd burned bridges, exposed lies, and maybe, just maybe, lost my family forever. But the anonymous email from last night burned brighter in my mind. Check Roger's safe. You're not safe yet. What did it mean? And why did my gut scream that this was far from over? I killed the engine and stepped into the downpour, my boots splashing through puddles as I hurried to my building. The lobby was empty, the fluorescent lights flickering like a bad omen. My apartment, a modest 1-bedroom in Capitol Hill, was my sanctuary, but tonight it felt like a cage. I locked the door behind me, double-checking the dossier on my coffee table. My hands shook as I poured a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the glow of a single lamp. I needed to think, to plan, but my mind was a tangle of betrayal and fear. The Thanksgiving showdown had been a calculated strike, months in the making. I'd known it would hurt, had braced for their fury, their tears, but nothing could have prepared me for the raw venom in Claire's eyes or the way Margaret's collapse had almost swayed me. She'd clutched her chest, gasping, her face pale as she crumpled to the porch. For a heartbeat, I'd believed it was real, my instinct to help surging forward, but then I saw the flicker in her eyes, the practiced tilt of her head, and I knew it was another performance. One of countless she'd staged to keep me tethered. I'd turned away, my resolve hardened, and left them standing in the rain, clutching the letters I'd written, my terms for salvation or ruin. But the dangers hadn't ended with their stunned silence. Driving to Margaret's house, my car had skidded on a rain-slicked bridge, the brakes failing as I careened toward the guardrail. I'd wrestled the wheel, my heart in my throat, and stopped inches from the edge, the Puget Sound yawning below. The mechanic later confirmed the brake lines had been cut, but with no witnesses, no fingerprints, it was my word against the void. Then, in the garage after the confrontation, a man I didn't recognize, tall, grizzled, with a scar across his jaw, had cornered me, his voice low and menacing. "Drop the lawsuits, lady, or you'll regret it." I'd stared him down, my voice steady despite the fear clawing my chest, and told him to take it up with my lawyer. He'd vanished into the shadows, but his threat lingered like smoke. I sipped the bourbon, its burn grounding me, and opened my laptop. The anonymous email stared back at me, its subject line a single word: truth. The sender's address was a string of random characters, untraceable, but the message was chillingly clear. Margaret's charity is a front. Roger's safe holds the proof. You're in deeper than you know. I'd hired a private investigator, Tom Caldwell, weeks ago, and his report had already blown the lid off my family's lies. Margaret's offshore accounts, funneling thousands to a fake charity. Liam's gambling debts, tying him to dangerous loan sharks. Claire's tax evasion, hiding influencer income in shell companies. But Roger's safe? That was new, a puzzle piece I hadn't placed, and the burner phone I'd found in Liam's car last month, tucked under the seat during a family dinner, only deepened the mystery. Its call log showed encrypted numbers, one labeled boss. Who was he contacting, and why? My phone buzzed again, Claire's name flashing on the screen. I ignored it, but her earlier message replayed in my mind. "You're a selfish bitch, Ellie. You'll pay for this." The venom wasn't new, but the desperation was. She'd lost her leverage, her carefully curated image crumbling under the weight of my evidence. At Thanksgiving, she'd humiliated me in front of Margaret's guests, neighbors, cousins, even her Pilates instructor, accusing me of sabotaging her influencer career by cutting her off. The room had gone silent, eyes boring into me, and I'd felt the old shame rise, the urge to shrink. But I hadn't. I'd met her gaze, my voice calm, and said, "If exposing your lies is sabotage, Claire, then I'm just getting started." The guests had whispered, and Claire's face had burned red, her mask slipping for all to see. I set the bourbon down and pulled out the dossier, flipping through its pages. Bank statements, text messages, emails promising repayment, every entry a wound, every lie a scar. The total, $325,000, 0 cents, was staggering, but the emotional toll was worse. 10 years of canceled vacations, postponed certifications, a dream waterfront condo I'd never bought, all sacrificed for a family that saw me as a resource, not a person. The August conversation I'd recorded, their laughter echoing as they called me a lonely cash machine, had been the final straw. I'd spent weeks after that night building my case, consulting Dr. Laura Bennett, my therapist, and Daniel Pierce, my lawyer. "You're not just fighting for money," Dr. Bennett had said. "You're fighting for your identity." She was right. This wasn't about dollars. It was about reclaiming my worth. A knock at my door jolted me from my thoughts, sharp and insistent. My pulse spiked. It was past midnight, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the couch ever since Liam's loan sharks had shown up, and crept to the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, his face obscured by a hoodie, his hands stuffed in his pockets. My heart raced. Was this the garage thug, back to make good on his I tightened my grip on the bat, my voice steady as I called, "Who is it?" "Delivery," he mumbled, holding up a small package. I didn't buy it. No delivery service operated this late, not in this weather. I kept the chain on and cracked the door, the bat hidden behind my leg. "Leave it on the mat," I said. He hesitated, his eyes darting down the hall, then dropped the package and bolted. I waited, listening for his footsteps to fade, then snatched the package and slammed the door, my hands trembling as I tore it open. Inside was a USB drive, unmarked, and a note in block letters. "Watch this. Trust no one." My cybersecurity instincts kicked in. I powered up my secondary laptop, one I kept air-gapped for sensitive work, and plugged in the USB. A single video file loaded, grainy but clear enough to make my blood run cold. It showed Roger in a dimly lit basement. Margaret's basement. I recognized the cracked concrete walls. Prying open a safe with a crowbar, he pulled out stacks of cash, a ledger, and what looked like a hard drive. His movements furtive. A voice off-screen, female and unfamiliar, said, "You sure she won't find out?" Roger's reply was clipped. "Ellie's too busy playing hero, she'll never know." The video cut to black, and I sat there, frozen, my mind racing. What was in that safe, and how was it tied to my money? I ejected the USB and hid it in a locked drawer, my thoughts spiraling. Roger had always been a shadow in our family, a man who nodded along with Margaret's schemes but never led them. Or so I'd thought. The safe, the anonymous email, the video, they'd pointed to something bigger, something darker than I'd imagined. I needed to call Tom Caldwell, but it was too late, and my nerves were shot. Instead, I texted my best friend, Sarah, a software engineer I'd met at a tech meetup. "Can you crash here tonight?" Shaky after family stuff. Her reply was instant. "On my way. Bring wine?" I smiled despite myself. Sarah was my rock, the one person who'd seen through my family's facade from the start. While I waited, I replayed the Thanksgiving scene, dissecting every moment for clues. The gifts I'd given, thoughtful, expensive, chosen to remind them what real generosity looked like, had been met with unease, not gratitude. Claire's designer necklace, Liam's cutting-edge smartwatch, Margaret and Roger's luxury cruise voucher. They'd barely glanced at them, their discomfort palpable. My gifts to them were a mirror, reflecting their greed back at them, and they'd flinched. Their gifts to me, though, were a slap. A thrift store mug with a chipped rim, and a $10.00 gift card to a coffee shop I never visited. "Budget's tight," Margaret had said, her eyes avoiding mine. "Tight, sure, but not too tight for the $5,000 chandelier glittering above us, paid for with my emergency loan from last spring." Sarah arrived an hour later, her rain-soaked jacket dripping as she hugged me. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, setting a bottle of Pinot Noir on the counter. I told her everything, the dossier, the confrontation, the video, the threats. Her eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt, just poured us both wine and listened. "Ellie, this is next level," she said when I finished. "You need to get that safe opened, and you need to watch your back. These people aren't just greedy. They're dangerous." She was right. The brake sabotage, the garage thug, the hacker Claire had hired to breach my company's server, they weren't isolated incidents. They were a pattern, a web closing around me. The hacker incident had nearly cost me my career. I'd caught the breach in time, tracing it to a lowlife Claire had paid $5,000 to, but the fallout was brutal. My boss, a hard-nosed VP named Karen, had hauled me into her office, her voice icy. "Your family's drama is bleeding into this firm, Eleanor. Fix it, or you're out." I'd spent weeks rebuilding trust, working overtime to secure our systems, all while dodging Claire's smug texts. Oops, my bad. Guess I trusted the wrong guy. It wasn't a mistake. It was sabotage, and I had the digital receipts to prove it. Sarah stayed until dawn, crashing on my couch as I lay awake, the USB's warning looping in my mind. Trust no one. By morning, I'd made a plan. I called Tom Caldwell, briefing him on the video and the safe. "I'll dig into Roger's financials," he said, his voice gruff. "But Ellie, you need to lay low. Whoever sent that USB knows more than they're saying." I also emailed Daniel Pierce, attaching a copy of the video and requesting a meeting. His reply was prompt. "This changes everything. Come to my office tomorrow. Bring the USB." Finally, I booked a session with Dr. Bennett, needing her clarity to navigate the emotional minefield ahead. The next day, I drove to Daniel's office in downtown Seattle, the USB tucked in my satchel alongside the dossier. The city was a blur of gray, the Space Needle barely visible through the fog. Daniel, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, watched the video in silence, his jaw tightening. "This is dynamite," he said when it ended. "If that ledger ties Roger to Margaret's charity, we're looking at money laundering, maybe racketeering. But we need the physical evidence. Can you get into that safe?" "Not without breaking in," I said. "And after yesterday, I'm persona non grata at Margaret's." He nodded, scribbling notes. "I file for a court order to search the house, but it'll take time. In the meantime, we tighten your case. The dossier's solid, but this video could make it airtight." "You're sure about pursuing fraud charges?" I hesitated, the weight of his question pressing down. Suing my family? My mother, my siblings? Felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. But then I remembered Claire's smirk, Liam's lies, Margaret's fake collapse. "I'm sure," I said, my voice firm. "They've had a decade to choose differently. They didn't." Daniel leaned back, studying me. "You're tougher than you look, Eleanor. But this is going to get uglier before it gets better. Be ready." I nodded, my resolve steeling. Ugly was nothing new. I'd been living in it for years. That night, I met Sarah at a dive bar in Fremont, needing a break from the chaos. The place was packed, neon signs buzzing, the air thick with laughter and cheap beer. We claimed a corner booth, and for a moment I let myself relax, the bourbon warming my chest. But then I saw him, a man at the bar, his face half hidden by a baseball cap, watching me. My skin prickled. He was the same build as the garage thug, the same cold stare. I nudged Sarah, nodding subtly toward him. "Don't look now, but we've got company," I whispered. She glanced over, her eyes narrowing. "Creep at 10 o'clock? Want me to call him out?" I shook my head, my mind racing. Confronting him could escalate things, but ignoring him felt like surrender. Before I could decide, he stood, tossed cash on the bar, and slipped out the door. I exhaled, but the unease lingered. Was he following me? Or was I paranoid, seeing threats in every shadow? The next week was a blur of tension and preparation. Tom Caldwell's updates were grim. Roger's financials showed ties to a shell company linked to Margaret's charity, and Liam's burner phone had pinged a number registered to a known loan shark. Claire, meanwhile, had gone silent on social media, her usual flood of selfies replaced by cryptic posts about betrayal. I kept my routine tight: work, home, therapy, avoiding any chance encounter, but the threats didn't stop. A brick crashed through my apartment window one night, wrapped in a note, "Back off or else." I called the police, but with no cameras, no witnesses, they could only file a report. I installed a security system the next day, my savings dwindling, but my safety non-negotiable. Dr. Bennett's sessions were my lifeline, her calm voice cutting through the chaos. "You're grieving," she said during our latest meeting. "Not just the family you thought you had, but the version of yourself who believed you could save them." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. She was right. I'd spent a decade trying to be their hero, equating money with love, only to realize they'd never loved me back. Not the way I deserved. "What now?" I asked, my voice raw. "You rebuild," she said. "Not for them, but for you." Rebuilding started small. I joined a tech meetup group, connecting with coders and engineers who shared my passion for cybersecurity. I met Ryan, a software engineer with kind eyes and a dry wit, at a hackathon. We grabbed coffee after, his easy laugh a balm to my frayed nerves. "You're intense, Eleanor," he said, grinning, "but in a good way, like you've got a fire inside you." I blushed, unused to compliments that didn't come with strings. Was I ready to date? To trust again? I didn't know, but Ryan's number in my phone felt like a step toward something new. But the past wouldn't let go. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Tom called with a bombshell. "I got a lead on your anonymous tipster," he said. "It's someone close to Roger. Maybe an ex-partner, maybe a disgruntled client. They're feeding you info, but they're scared." That USB drop was a risk. I gripped the phone, my mind racing. "What about the safe?" I asked. "Anything yet?" He hesitated. "I staked out Margaret's house last night. Roger was moving boxes to a storage unit. Looked nervous. I'd bet my license the safe's contents are in play. We need to move fast." Fast wasn't fast enough. That night, I got a call from an unknown number, the voice distorted but unmistakably male. "You're digging too deep, Harper. Drop it, or we drop you." The line went dead, and I sat there, my heart pounding, the bat in my hand useless against a faceless enemy. I called Tom, who urged me to stay with Sarah until he could trace the call. I packed a bag and drove to her place, the Seattle skyline a blur of lights and rain. Sarah welcomed me with a hug, no questions asked, and I crashed on her couch, the weight of the past month crushing me. The next morning, I woke to a text from Liam. "Meet me, alone. I need to explain." Against my better judgment, I agreed, choosing a public cafe in Pike Place Market. Liam looked haggard when he arrived, his hoodie stained, his eyes bloodshot. "I'm sorry, Ellie," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know how bad it got. Margaret, Roger, the charity. I'm in deep with some bad people." He slid the burner phone across the table, its screen cracked. "I was supposed to keep tabs on you. They know you're on to them." "Who's they?" I demanded, my voice low. He glanced around, paranoid. "I can't say. But the safe, it's not just money, it's records, names, deals. If you get it, you're dead." I leaned forward, my anger flaring. "You lied to me, Liam. You took my money, laughed behind my back. Why should I trust you now?" He flinched, tears welling. "Because I'm scared, Ellie, and you're the only one who can stop this." I left the cafe shaken, the burner phone in my pocket, its weight a reminder of the danger closing in. Tom traced the threatening call to a payphone near Margaret's house, too close for coincidence. Daniel filed for an emergency court order to search the house, citing the video and the threats, but before the judge could rule, Margaret made her move. She showed up at my office, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. "Ellie, I'm sorry," she sobbed, drawing stares from my colleagues. "I've joined a financial crimes program. I'm selling the house, the cars, everything to pay you back. Please, don't destroy us." It was a performance, but a good one, and for a moment I wavered. Then I remembered the offshore accounts, the fake charity, the years of lies. "Actions, not words," I said, my voice cold. "Sign the repayment agreement, start therapy, then we'll talk." She nodded, tears streaming, but as she left, I saw her glance at a man waiting outside, a stranger in a dark coat, his face obscured. Was he the mysterious figure from Thanksgiving? The one who'd lingered in the background, watching me? My gut said yes, and my fear said he was trouble. The court order came through a week later, and Tom led a team to Margaret's house. I stayed away, too raw to face them, But his call that night was electric. "We got the safe," he said. "Ledgers, cash, a hard drive, names of players in a laundering ring. Margaret's charity was the hub, and Roger was the bagman. Your money funded it, Ellie, but you're clear. The feds are involved now." I exhaled, relief flooding me, but it was short-lived. "There's more," Tom said. "The tipster's name was in the ledger. A woman, Diane, Roger's ex-partner. She's missing, Ellie, and they know you've got the USB." The revelation hit like a tidal wave. My family wasn't just greedy. They were entangled in a criminal network, and I'd pulled the thread that could unravel it. I moved to a safe house, a nondescript rental arranged by Daniel, and spent days poring over the dossier, the USB, the burner phone. The feds took Margaret and Roger into custody, their assets frozen, their lies exposed. Liam joined a debt counseling program, got a job at a tech repair shop, and started sending small repayments, his letters full of remorse. Claire complied with the financial terms, but refused therapy, her texts venomous. "You ruined my life, Ellie. Enjoy your victory." I deleted them, focusing on the future. 6 months later, I stood in my new waterfront condo, the Puget Sound sparkling outside my window. I'd joined a tech meetup group, my friendships growing, and Ryan had become more than a coffee date. Our first real date was tonight, a quiet dinner at a bistro in Belltown. Family therapy sessions, facilitated by Dr. Bennett, had begun. Liam and Margaret attending, Claire absent. We'd mapped our dysfunction, peeled back layers of greed and guilt, and started building something new, fragile but honest. I was preparing for a neutral family dinner, my first, with them since Thanksgiving, at a downtown restaurant. My boundaries were clear. 2 hours, no financial talk, everyone pays their own way. I was ready to walk away if the old patterns resurfaced, but I was also open to healing, to a family that might one day respect me. The safe's contents had exposed a truth bigger than I'd imagined, but they'd also freed me. I wasn't their ATM, their victim, their pawn. I was Eleanor Harper, and I'd found my worth, not in what I gave, but in who I was. As I dressed for dinner, my phone pinged with a new email. No sender, no subject, just 3 words. "You're still not safe." I froze, the past rushing back, but then I straightened, my fire reignited. Whatever came next, I'd face it. I'd survived their betrayal, their threats, their lies. I'd survived this too.